Arriving already tired. Have you ever woken up in a place you once dreamed of, only to feel more tired than hopeful? You finally arrive in the United States, a country people call opportunity, but inside you feel empty, slow, and strangely invisible. You tell yourself, this should feel exciting, yet your body disagrees. Your mind is heavy. Your English feels stuck somewhere between thought and sound. And you start wondering a dangerous question: what if I'm not strong enough for this? This video is not about success stories. It's about what happens before them, when kindness is the only thing keeping a day from falling apart. I landed in the US 3 weeks ago, already exhausted, not from the flight, but from expectations. You know that feeling when everyone thinks you're starting a new chapter, but you're secretly just trying to survive page 1? That was me. Jet lag mixed with pressure does something strange to your brain. According to psychology, when your environment changes too fast, your nervous system stays in alert mode. Cortisol goes up. Everything feels louder, faster, heavier. You're not weak, you're overloaded. The first few days felt like walking on a treadmill that wouldn't slow down. Streets were wide. Stores were huge. Conversations moved fast, like everyone had somewhere important to be, except me. Simple tasks became obstacles. Ordering food. Asking for directions. Understanding jokes. My English wasn't terrible, but it wasn't automatic either. There's a big difference between knowing English and living in it. Here's something interesting. Neuroscientists say the brain hates uncertainty more than difficulty. And those early days were full of uncertainty. Not knowing if I said the right thing. Not knowing if I sounded rude. Not knowing if people were impatient, or if that was just my insecurity talking. Every interaction felt like a small test, and failing too many tests in a row quietly drains your confidence. I remember standing in a convenience store one evening, staring at a shelf for way too long. Too many choices. Too many words. My brain froze. This is called decision fatigue, and it's real. When your mind is tired, even choosing a sandwich feels hard. I caught myself thinking, why is this so difficult? That thought alone made the day feel heavier. And here's the honest part people don't talk about. When you're tired and overwhelmed, your inner voice stops being kind. It says things like, you should be better at this. Or worse, maybe you don't belong here. That voice doesn't need to be loud to be dangerous. It just needs to be constant. But nothing dramatic happened that day. No big failure. No big win. Just a series of small moments that felt slightly off. And that's exactly why this story matters. Because most people don't quit on their worst day. They quit on an average bad day, when nothing terrible happens, but nothing kind does either. This is where English learning quietly fits in. When you're tired, your brain learns differently. Studies show we absorb language better when we feel safe, not stressed. Yet most people try to push harder when they're already exhausted. That never works for long. What works is slowing down. Listening to real stories. Repeating simple phrases. letting meaning come before perfection. For example, I kept practicing one small sentence in my head: it's okay to take it slow. Simple English. Big relief. That first week taught me something important. Before motivation comes comfort. Before confidence comes safety. And before progress comes one small moment that reminds you you're human. Not a machine chasing improvement. I didn't know it yet, but a very small, unexpected kindness was already on its way. And it would change the tone of an entire day. 3 weeks of silent tests. Nobody tells you this, but the hardest tests in life don't come with questions. They come with silence. No feedback. No clear sign that you're doing okay. 3 weeks in the United States felt exactly like that. A quiet exam where the rules kept changing, and the clock never stopped. On the outside, everything looked normal. On the inside, every day felt like I was being evaluated by an invisible system I didn't understand. You wake up each morning telling yourself, "Today will be easier." That sentence becomes a ritual, not a belief. Because deep down, you're still tired. Still translating in your head. Still scanning faces to see if you're welcome or just tolerated. Psychologists call this hypervigilance. Your brain stays alert because it thinks you're not safe yet. New country. New rhythm. New social rules. Your nervous system hasn't caught up. What makes these weeks difficult isn't one big challenge, but many small ones stacked together. You miss a bus. You misunderstand a question. You answer too slowly. None of these things are serious, but they create microstress. Research shows that repeated low-level stress drains mental energy faster than a single major event. That's why by the end of the day, you feel empty for no clear reason. There was a morning when I stood at a crosswalk, waiting for the light to change. Everyone around me knew exactly when to move. I hesitated for half a second. That half-second felt loud in my head. Why am I always behind? That thought wasn't about traffic. It was about life. When you're new, even walking feels like a performance. English made everything sharper. Not harder, sharper. Because you hear everything, but you don't catch everything. Your brain fills the gaps with guesses, and guesses cost energy. Linguists explain that second language processing uses more working memory. That means your brain gets tired faster, even when conversations are simple. So when you feel drained, it's not because you're bad at English. It's because your brain is working overtime. To cope, I started doing something small but powerful. I stopped trying to understand everything. Instead, I focused on catching one idea per interaction. One sentence. One tone. One key word. For example, when someone asked, "How's your day going?" I didn't search for a perfect answer. I used one safe phrase, "It's been a long day, but I'm okay." Slow. Clear. Honest. That was enough. Interestingly, psychologists say the brain relaxes when it feels in control of small things. You don't need to control the whole situation, just one part of it. Choosing simple English gave me that control back. It reduced pressure. It made conversations feel human again, not like exams. But even with these small strategies, the days were still heavy. Because tests don't end just because you're trying. They end when something shifts emotionally. When your brain finally gets evidence that you're not alone in this. That evidence didn't come from success. It came from kindness. Not a big gesture. Not a speech. Just a moment so small that most people would forget it by dinner time. But when you're carrying silent tests every day, even the smallest kindness can feel like someone quietly whispering, "You're doing better than you think." And that whisper was getting closer. When everything feels too fast. There's a strange moment that happens when life moves faster than your thoughts. Your body is present, but your mind is always one step behind trying to catch up. That's how the United States felt to me during that third stretch of days. Not hostile. Not unkind. Just fast. Too fast for a tired brain learning how to exist in a new rhythm. Everything had a timer. Crosswalks counted down. Cashiers scanned items in seconds. Conversations jumped from topic to topic without warning. And there I was, mentally buffering like a slow internet connection. You start noticing the gap between response and reaction. People speak. You understand, just half a second later. That delay feels small, but emotionally, it feels huge. Cognitive science has a name for this: processing lag. When your brain works in a second language, it needs extra milliseconds to decode sound, meaning, and intention. Those milliseconds add up. By the end of the day, you don't feel confused, you feel behind. And feeling behind all the time slowly erodes your confidence. I remember standing in line at a coffee shop, practicing my order in my head like a script. Simple English. No fancy words. "Hi, can I get a small coffee, please?" When it was my turn, the barista smiled and asked something unexpected. My script collapsed. My brain panicked. I caught maybe 2 words. I froze for a second too long. That moment wasn't dramatic. But it triggered a familiar thought: everyone else can do this. Why can't I? Psychologists call this social comparison bias. In new environments, we compare our inside feelings to other people's outside behavior. We assume they're calm because they look calm. We forget they've been practicing this life for years. Here's the truth that helped me breathe again: speed is not intelligence. Speed is familiarity. Americans aren't fast because they're smarter. They're fast because their brains are at home. Mine wasn't, yet. And that's okay. So I changed one thing. I gave myself permission to be slow. Not apologetic slow. Intentional slow. I started pausing before answering. I used phrases like, "Let me think for a second," or "Sorry, can you say that again slowly?" Simple English. Powerful boundary. Studies show that when you slow conversations down, comprehension increases for both speakers. People don't mind repeating. They mind guessing. Something interesting happened when I slowed down. People slowed down with me. Not everyone, but enough. And that shift changed the emotional temperature of my days. Instead of feeling chased by time, I felt like I was walking beside it. This matters for English practice. Most learners think fluency comes from speaking faster. It doesn't. It comes from understanding deeper, repeating clearly, breathing between sentences. When your nervous system is calm, your brain stores language better. That's not motivation talk, that's neuroscience. Still, even with these adjustments, there were days when everything felt like too much. When being slow felt like being left out. When I questioned whether adapting was worth the energy. And then, on one of those days, when nothing went right and everything felt rushed, something small happened. Something so ordinary that it shouldn't have mattered. But it did. Language as a daily wall. Walls are funny things. They're not always tall or obvious. Some are invisible, and you only notice them when you walk straight into one. Language was that kind of wall for me. Not a complete barrier, more like a constant resistance. Every day, every hour, every interaction, there it was. Quiet. Solid. Unmoving. You don't realize how much language shapes your confidence until you lose easy access to it. Back home, words come out without effort. Jokes land. Explanations flow. In the US, I had to build every sentence before speaking it. Word by word. Sound by sound. That construction work is exhausting. Linguists explain that speaking a second language activates more brain regions than your native one. It's like carrying groceries upstairs instead of walking on flat ground. The wall showed up in small moments. Reading signs too quickly and missing details. Hearing announcements but catching only the middle. Starting a sentence confidently, then changing direction halfway because the word I needed didn't arrive. When that happens enough times, you start speaking less, not because you have nothing to say, but because saying it costs too much energy. This is where many English learners quietly give up. Not dramatically. They just stop trying in public. They nod. They smile. They say okay to everything. Psychologists call this learned avoidance. Your brain learns that silence feels safer than effort. The problem is, silence also builds loneliness. I noticed this happening to me one afternoon when a simple interaction turned complicated. Someone asked a normal question. Nothing personal, nothing difficult. I understood it. I knew the answer. But I couldn't find the clean English path to say it. So I hesitated. That pause stretched. The moment passed. Conversation over. Afterward, I felt something heavier than embarrassment. It was frustration mixed with grief. Grief for the version of myself that could speak freely. That emotional reaction is real. Studies show that language barriers can temporarily lower self-esteem, even in confident adults. It's not weakness. It's loss of expression. That night, instead of pushing harder, I tried something different. I practiced micro-English. Very small, very usable sentences. Not grammar drills. Not vocabulary lists. Real phrases I could survive with. Things like, I'm still learning. Can we go slow? I don't understand yet. These sentences are simple, but they do something powerful. They turn the wall into a door. Here's the science part. When you name your limitation out loud, your stress response drops. Your brain stops pretending. It relaxes. And relaxed brains learn faster. That's why children learn languages so well. They're not afraid of being unfinished. The next day, I used one of those sentences. Just once. The result wasn't magical. But it was human. The other person nodded. Slowed down. Smiled. The wall didn't disappear, but it cracked. And through that crack, something unexpected was about to come through. A bad day that almost broke me. Bad days don't announce themselves. They look normal at first. You wake up. You get dressed. You tell yourself you're fine. But somewhere underneath, everything is already heavier than usual. That day was like that for me. Nothing catastrophic happened. And that's exactly why it was dangerous. From the start, things felt slightly off. I missed a small detail that mattered. I misunderstood a simple instruction. Each mistake was minor, but together they formed a quiet pressure in my chest. Psychologists call this cumulative stress, the kind that builds without a single clear cause. Your brain can't point to one problem, so it blames you instead. By midday, I was exhausted from translating the world. Not just English words, but tone, intention, facial expressions. When someone spoke quickly, my mind raced to keep up. When they paused, I worried I was expected to respond. This constant mental juggling drains cognitive resources. Research shows that sustained attention in a second language can reduce emotional regulation. In simple terms, when your brain is tired, your emotions leak. That's when the thought appeared. Quiet. Sharp. Why am I even doing this? Not dramatic. Not angry. Just empty. That question is often the last stop before people give up. Not because they hate the journey, but because they're too tired to continue it. I remember sitting alone for a moment, staring at nothing in particular. My body felt slow. My shoulders were tense. Breathing was shallow. This is your nervous system shifting into freeze mode. It's not laziness. It's self-protection. Your brain is saying, I can't process more right now. I tried to do something small to reset. Walking, breathing, repeating a calm sentence in English. This is just a bad day, not a bad life. Simple words. Slow pace. There's evidence behind this. Self-talk in a second language can create emotional distance, making stress feel more manageable. It didn't fix the day, but it kept it from collapsing completely. Still, the weight stayed. And then came the moment that almost broke me. Not because it was harsh, but because I expected it to be. I braced for impatience. For dismissal. For that familiar feeling of being a burden. Instead, something else happened. Something small. Something unexpected. And in that moment, the day took a different direction. An unexpected small kindness. It didn't look important at first. No dramatic music. No slow motion. Just a moment so ordinary that, on a better day, I might not even remember it. But when you're carrying a heavy day, small things land differently. They land deeper. I was standing there, clearly tired, clearly slower than everyone else. My words came out careful, uneven. I expected the usual rhythm. Finish quickly, move on, don't slow the line. Instead, the person in front of me paused. Not impatient. Not confused. Just present. They looked at me and said slowly, "Take your time." That was it. 5 syllables. No advice. No pity. But my body reacted before my mind did. My shoulders dropped. My breathing changed. This wasn't imagination. Studies show that perceived kindness triggers the parasympathetic nervous system, the part responsible for calming you down. One gentle signal can tell your brain, "You're safe right now." What surprised me most was how rare that feeling had been lately. Not kindness itself, but permission. Permission to be slow. Permission to not perform. Permission to exist without rushing. When you're in a new country, you often feel like you're borrowing space. That sentence gave it back to me. Here's why this matters psychologically. Humans are wired for social regulation. We calm down through others before we can calm ourselves. That's why children need soothing voices, and adults still do, just in quieter ways. A small kindness acts like a mirror, reflecting a calmer version of you back to yourself. In that moment, my English didn't suddenly improve. I didn't become confident overnight. But something shifted. I finished my sentence. Slowly. Clearly. Imperfectly. And nobody rushed me. That alone felt like a win. Later, I replayed the moment in my head, not to analyze the words but the tone. Take your time. Simple English. Real English. This is the kind of language that actually changes behavior. Not fancy phrases. Not grammar rules. Just human signals wrapped in words. For English learners, this is a powerful lesson. You don't need perfect language to create connection. You need intention. Slowing your speech. Softening your tone. Using fewer words with more care. That's how real communication works in everyday American life. That small kindness didn't solve my problems. The challenges were still there. The language wall didn't disappear. But the day stopped feeling like an enemy. And once a day stops fighting you, you can face it again. The most interesting part? My brain remembered that moment better than any mistake I made that day. Neuroscience explains this too. Positive social moments create stronger memory traces under stress. Kindness sticks. And that's when I realized something important. If one small act can change a day, then learning to notice and offer, those acts might change more than we think. Why small kindness works. Here's the strange part about kindness. Your brain reacts to it as if it were medicine. Not metaphorically. Literally. When that small moment happened, my body calmed down faster than logic ever could. Science has a clear explanation for this, and it has nothing to do with being soft or emotional. When you experience kindness, your brain releases oxytocin. It's often called the bonding hormone, but that's too narrow. Oxytocin lowers stress, reduces fear, and increases trust. It tells your nervous system, you're not alone in this. And when you're under pressure, new country, new language, that message is powerful. What makes small kindness especially effective is surprise. Your brain is constantly predicting what will happen next. On a bad day, it predicts impatience, judgment, indifference. When reality breaks that prediction with kindness, your brain pauses. That pause creates emotional relief. Psychologists call this prediction error. In simple terms, your brain expected pain and got safety instead. This is why big motivational speeches often fail, but tiny gestures work. Your brain doesn't need a lecture when it's tired. It needs a signal, a nod, a slower voice, a few calm words. That's enough to shift your internal state. After that moment, I paid attention. I noticed how often people offered small kindness without realizing it. Holding a door. Repeating a sentence without frustration. Saying "no worries" when I apologized for my English. These phrases are common in American English for a reason. They regulate social comfort. They keep interactions smooth, especially with strangers. For language learners, this is crucial. You're not just learning words, you're learning emotional cues. When someone says, "Take your time," they're not just giving permission. They're reducing social threat. That's why those phrases feel so good to hear. And that's why they're powerful to use. I started practicing kindness outward, not as a strategy, but as an experiment. Slowing my speech when someone else looked confused. Saying "it's okay," instead of correcting myself harshly. Smiling before speaking. These small acts didn't require fluent English. They required awareness. Interestingly, research shows that performing small acts of kindness improves the giver's mood more than the receiver's in the long run. Your brain rewards you for creating safety. That means kindness is not just moral, it's practical. It makes your own day easier to carry. This changes how you approach challenges. When you realize you don't need to be perfect to be kind, pressure drops. English becomes a tool, not a test. Conversations become shared experiences, not performances. That's when learning accelerates. Not because you push harder, but because your brain finally feels safe enough to absorb. And once your brain feels safe, something quiet begins to grow. Confidence. Learning English through real life. Most people think learning English means sitting down and studying harder. More vocabulary. More rules. More pressure. But after that small kindness, I realized something different. Real progress wasn't happening when I forced myself to learn. It was happening when I allowed myself to live and learn inside those moments. Your brain learns best when information is tied to emotion and context. This is called experiential learning. When a phrase is connected to a real situation, your brain stores it deeper. That's why you can remember a sentence someone said on a hard day, but forget 10 sentences from a textbook. So I changed my approach. I stopped asking, "How do I sound?" and started asking, "What do I need right now?" If I needed time, I used, "Can you give me a moment?" If I didn't understand, I said, "I'm still learning. Can you say it slowly?" Simple. Honest. Real. I practiced listening differently too. Instead of trying to catch every word, I listened for emotion. Was the tone friendly? Neutral? Rushed? This skill matters more than perfect vocabulary in daily life. Studies show that humans understand intent faster than words. When you get the intent, the language becomes less scary. One afternoon, I noticed something surprising. I wasn't translating as much. Not because my English suddenly improved, but because my anxiety dropped. Anxiety blocks working memory. When it's lower, comprehension feels easier. This is why calm environments accelerate language learning more than intense ones. I also started using repetition on purpose. Not repeating grammar, but repeating life. Ordering the same thing. Using the same phrases. Repetition reduces cognitive load. Your brain likes patterns. And when patterns feel safe, confidence grows quietly. For example, I practiced one sentence every day. It's been challenging, but I'm learning. That sentence became a bridge. It explained my situation without apology. It invited patience without begging for it. And each time I said it, it felt more natural. This is real English practice. Not perfect English. Not fast English. But usable English. The kind you can rely on when you're tired. Here's something important for anyone listening. If you wait to feel confident before speaking, you'll wait forever. Confidence is not the starting point. It's the side effect of survival done gently. By learning through real life, I wasn't just improving my English. I was rebuilding trust in myself. Trust that I could handle uncomfortable moments. Trust that I didn't need to rush. Trust that small steps counted. And once that trust returned, another shift happened, one I didn't expect. I started to feel lighter. Confidence grows quietly. Confidence doesn't arrive like a celebration. It doesn't knock. It doesn't announce itself. It grows quietly in the background while you're busy surviving ordinary days. That's what surprised me most. I didn't feel braver. I just felt less afraid. One morning, I noticed I was walking faster. Not rushing. Just moving without second-guessing every step. My shoulders were lower. My breathing was steady. These are physical signs psychologists associate with reduced threat perception. In simple words, my body had stopped treating the world like an enemy. The challenges were still there. English was still imperfect. Situations were still unfamiliar. But my reaction changed. Instead of freezing, I adjusted. Instead of apologizing constantly, I explained once and moved on. That shift didn't come from motivation. It came from accumulated safety. There's research showing that confidence is built through successful recovery, not success itself. Every time you handle a small discomfort and survive it, your brain updates its internal story. I can manage this. Over 3 weeks, those updates added up. I remember a moment when I misunderstood a question and answered incorrectly. The old me would replay it all day. This time, I corrected myself calmly and smiled. No self-attack. That's growth you don't see on the surface, but it changes everything underneath. English played a role here too. I started using fewer words, but with more certainty. Clear tone. Simple structure. Americans respond well to clarity. You don't need complex language to be respected. You need intention and calm delivery. This is an important lesson for learners. Confidence doesn't come from sounding native. It comes from being understandable, and being okay with that. When you accept your current level, you free up mental space to improve naturally. Another interesting thing happened. I began noticing kindness again, not just receiving it, but recognizing it. When you're anxious, your brain filters for danger. When you're calmer, it filters for connection. Same world, different lens. This feedback loop is powerful. Small kindness reduces stress. Reduced stress improves communication. Better communication increases confidence. And confidence makes you more open to kindness. It's not magic. It's biology. By the end of that 3rd week, I realized something important. The journey wasn't about becoming someone new. It was about returning to a version of myself that trusted the process. And that realization changed how I saw the hard days. They weren't obstacles anymore. They were training. Hard days didn't disappear. Hard days didn't magically leave once I felt calmer. They stayed. They just stopped controlling me. That's an important difference people rarely talk about. Life in a new country doesn't suddenly become easy because you've had one good moment. What changes is how much power those hard moments have over your mood, your confidence, and your sense of direction. There were still days when English felt heavy. Days when conversations moved too fast again. Days when I misunderstood something small and felt that familiar sting in my chest. But instead of collapsing inward, I noticed the reaction sooner. My brain didn't spiral as far. Psychologists call this emotional regulation, not the absence of stress, but faster recovery from it. Recovery is a skill. And like any skill, it improves with repetition. Each time a hard moment passed without breaking me, my nervous system learned something new. This is uncomfortable, but not dangerous. That lesson is incredibly important for anyone learning a language or adapting to a new environment. I stopped labeling days as good or bad. I started seeing them as heavy or light. Heavy days needed more patience. Lighter days allowed more curiosity. This reframing matters because your brain responds better to neutral descriptions than emotional judgments. Saying today is heavy feels manageable. Saying today is terrible does not. English practice fit naturally into this mindset. On heavy days, I didn't push. I listened more than I spoke. I repeated familiar phrases. I allowed silence. On lighter days, I tried something new, one new sentence, one small interaction. This flexible approach aligns with cognitive load theory. Learning works best when effort matches energy. One small habit helped more than I expected. At the end of each day, I replayed one kind moment in my mind, no matter how small. Not to be grateful in a forced way, but to remind my brain that safety existed. Neuroscience shows that recalling positive social interactions strengthens emotional resilience. You're training your memory to balance itself. And here's the key insight. Kindness didn't remove difficulty. It changed the meaning of difficulty. Hard days stopped feeling like proof of failure. They became part of the process, expected, survivable, temporary. That shift is quiet, but it's everything. Because once difficulty loses its threat, you stop fighting yourself. And when you stop fighting yourself, you start noticing something else. The people around you. What I learned about humans. Somewhere between the hard days and the quieter ones, I started noticing people again. Not as obstacles, not as judges, but as humans moving through their own invisible struggles. When you're overwhelmed, your world shrinks. Everything feels personal. But when pressure eases, even a little, perspective returns. I learned that most people are not impatient. They're just busy. And busy doesn't mean unkind. It means distracted. Once I stopped assuming the worst, interactions softened. A neutral face wasn't rejection. A short answer wasn't anger. My brain had been filling in blanks with fear. Psychology backs this up. Under stress, we develop a negativity bias. We interpret ambiguity as threat. That bias kept me guarded in the beginning. But kindness, even small, disrupted that pattern. It reminded me that neutrality is not hostility, and silence is not judgment. I also learned that humans respond to honesty more than perfection. When I said, "I'm still learning," people adjusted naturally. Not out of obligation, but out of recognition. Everyone knows what it's like to be new at something. That shared memory creates instant empathy. This matters deeply for language learners. You're not asking for special treatment. You're offering context. And context builds connection. Once I understood that, my fear of bothering people faded. Communication became cooperation instead of performance. The most surprising lesson was this: kindness is often unintentional. People don't wake up planning to save someone's day. They just choose patience in a small moment. That choice travels further than they'll ever know. And that made me wonder, how many days have I unknowingly changed for others, just by being calm? By not rushing? By listening fully? The idea felt grounding. It reminded me that I wasn't just receiving kindness. I was part of it. That realization stayed with me, because it meant I wasn't powerless in hard environments. I could contribute to the emotional climate around me, even with limited English. And that leads to the last thing this journey taught me. Sometimes, changing a day doesn't require strength. It requires softness. One small kindness, one better day. If you had asked me before these 3 weeks what changes a day, I would have said something big. Good news, success, progress you can measure. Now I know better. A day changes when its emotional direction changes. And that often happens through something small. One sentence. One pause. One moment where someone chooses patience over speed. That's all it took to stop a bad day from becoming a bad story about myself. The challenges didn't vanish. The language didn't suddenly become easy. But my relationship with difficulty changed. This is the heart of the message I want to leave you with. If you're tired of learning English, if you feel slow, if you feel behind, you're not broken. Your brain is protecting you. And sometimes, the fastest way forward is to slow everything down. Use simple English. Real English. Phrases that create safety, not pressure. Take your time. It's okay. I'm learning. These aren't weak sentences. They're stabilizers. They keep you standing when everything else feels shaky. Science supports this. Emotional safety accelerates learning. Kindness, given or received, lowers stress hormones and opens cognitive pathways. In plain words, when you feel safe, you learn better. When you learn better, you feel safer. It's a loop worth protecting. So here's a quiet challenge. Today, don't try to improve your whole life. Just improve one moment. Offer patience, to yourself or someone else. Notice how your body responds. Notice how the day shifts, even slightly. Because one small kindness won't change everything. But it can change a day. And sometimes, that's where everything begins. There is one small thing I didn't tell you at the beginning. After that day, I started choosing kindness on purpose. Slower, softer and more patient, with others and with myself. And something quietly changed. The days didn't become easier, but they stopped feeling so heavy. 3 weeks in the United States didn't turn me into a new person, but they left me with a calm belief. One small kindness can still give a hard day a good ending. If today feels long, if English feels difficult, or if you're close to giving up, try one small kind action, for someone else or for yourself. You might be surprised how a day can change direction. If you want more real stories, slow and simple English, and small moments that quietly change a day, subscribe. The next story might begin with you.